Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 8th masterclass provided to you by Women for Cyber in the framework of its Masterclass with a Role Model series. Before proceeding with today's guest, a small introduction from our side. My name is Nina Hasratian, and I'm here today with my colleague Saskia Brookman. And unfortunately, our other colleague Nina Olesen couldn't be here with us today, and and also with our Secretary General Luigi Rebuffi, we are the operational team behind the Women for Cyber Foundation. So, Women for Cyber, as many of you I'm sure by now know, is an initiative launched by EXO, so the European Cybersecurity Organization, to help fill the gap of cybersecurity professionals in Europe by boosting the participation of girls and women in cybersecurity professions. Through our actions and activities, we encourage the skilling, upskilling, and reskilling of both junior and senior professionals. Our comprehensive mission covers a wide range of activities going from community building, awareness, encouraging in-company trainings, courses, and of course also reaching out to the national and European political level. We have an all-inclusive approach, which is reflected in our constant work with both women and men from all sectors, public, private, and academic. The Women for Cyber Foundation is the entity that supports our activities with a decision-making body, and the Women for Cyber Council, which is an ad hoc advisory body providing strategic recommendations to the decision-making body on the activities of the foundation. Now, this leads me to introduce you to Līga Rozentāle, who is a member of the Women for Cyber Council. In her day job, Līga is Microsoft's Senior Director for European Governmental Affairs. She leads a team that analyzes EU cybersecurity legislation and strategies and develops integration of Microsoft into the intersection of cyber diplomacy, legislation, and threat intelligence environment in Europe and globally. Līga currently also serves as a special advisor to the Latvian mission to the UN and is a delegate for the UN OEWG. She was the first Latvian cyber diplomat at the EU and NATO. She also worked at the Global Cyber Alliance and is a former UN Disarmament Fellow. Līga is, above all else, a first-class supporter of gender inclusion in cybersecurity. For us, this is majoritarily reflected in her deep commitment to the Women for Cyber values and objectives, as well as through her participation to our activities. But that was still not enough for Līga, and she went one step further. Thanks to her initiative, Microsoft became one of the first companies donating to our foundation and thus allowing us to improve and increase the scope and quality of our activities. So before everything else, thank you very much for your generosity, because at the end of the day, we only have the resources that we are given to make miracles happen. So, that being said, today Līga will discuss the opportunities in the cybersecurity industry to strengthen the European cyberspace through cooperation between EU institutions, EU member states, NATO, the private sector, academia, and civil society. Honestly, I can't wait to hear all about it. Let's all buckle up and get ready for a wild ride through the cybersecurity multi-stakeholder community. But before that, I'd like to highlight a few small rules to ensure that this masterclass goes as smoothly as possible. First, please make sure that you are muted to avoid any background noises. Once Līga is done with her initial comments, we will open the floor for the Q&A session for an interactive exchange with participants. If you have questions, please raise your hands through the available button and wait until Saskia or I invite you to speak. Then you can unmute yourself. Also, don't hesitate to use the chat as well, though we do encourage for a live exchange. And now, without further ado, I wish you all a wonderful and educational session. Līga, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nina. That was really an excellent introduction. I don't think anybody could have done it better. You make it sound really exciting when maybe some days it certainly doesn't seem that way. But I am really honored to be here, and thank you for the invitation to speak, and thank you for all those giving up your Friday afternoons to join this session. I hope it is interactive. I do have my chat open, And in a group this size, I think it's absolutely okay to interrupt and try to get my attention to have more detailed questions about what I'll be presenting. When Nina asked me to present this masterclass, I have to admit that it was quite a daunting assignment because I wasn't sure exactly how I could fit all this time. And what would
I'm sorry, Līga, you are breaking out. We kind of lost you after daunting assignment. Sorry, are you still connected? Yeah.
One second, let me try to connect to Līga.
Okay, I hear you now.
Okay, hi, hello back. Are you still there?
Okay. All right, we'll see what we can do in this environment. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm afraid
Yeah,
that
we
I'm
can.
gonna be asking that. Okay, so I assume you hear me unless you tell me otherwise. Okay, so back to the content. All right, so I thought about what I could offer from my career and my experience in several different sectors concerning cybersecurity. And so, you know, I work on legal issues, I work on legislation, but I'm not a lawyer. I work on technical issues, but don't have a technical background. And I work on diplomacy as well, but I'm no longer a diplomat. So putting all of these things together, I did want to address how multi-stakeholderism, which takes advantage of all these experiences that I have, can really be at the core of cybersecurity, and where do the opportunities lie now that we have an increased and much more ambitious cybersecurity strategy in the EU, but not only in the EU. This is finally, for years we have been fighting to have cybersecurity reach the highest level of strategic discussions in whichever organization, whether that be national or international, because it never received the attention that we wanted it to have. So finally we have at the NATO summit coming up next month, we have several topics on technology. In the EU Council, we finally discuss more emerging security challenges more than ever before. I was very pleased the EU just recently had a tabletop exercise among governments, and also including other democratic governments around the world. So these are really good progression of events, and it really shows that cybersecurity and emerging threats from technology have finally become a part of the strategic discussion on geopolitical level and on the policy-making level for Europe and other regions of the world. In any case, so I think that addressing multi-stakeholderism and how different sectors can help drive these discussions is quite important, and we have lots of opportunities to do that. Okay, so before I dive into some of other of my history, I reiterate, please do use the chat to ask questions. I'm more used to Teams, but I'll settle for WebEx for today. That's fine. And I rely on my colleague Jana, who will be scrolling through the presentation as I speak. So a short introduction to myself. I'm currently working at Microsoft, as Nina said, and I came into cybersecurity issues around 7 years ago only. Before that, I was working in the security and defense sector at the Ministry of Defense of Latvia, and my education was more in defense and security and international relations. But I think that this, combined with studies also in non-proliferation, has helped guide me through cybersecurity in a way that gives a unique perspective, especially on security and defense and how that interacts with cybersecurity. But I can't stick to only what interests me most, so issues of legislation and different certification details come into play as well. So let's go forward one slide. So I've addressed some points that I think would be useful to discuss. And this is really looking at EU and the cybersecurity strategy that has really a very in-depth layered approach to addressing various areas of cybersecurity. So I'll go into that a little bit more. And there's lots of organizations that are looking at cybersecurity at various aspects. As we are members of most of these organizations, depending on where you come from. But they all focus on cybersecurity in a different way and emerging technology threats. And as a private sector company, it's interesting to see where the opportunities lie. And also not only for the private sector, but where the government can use different resources to try to find unique opportunities. And also how do you engage academia and civil society in this as well.
Līga, we cannot hear you anymore. Are you still with us? Hello. Well, already apologies to our participants. Please bear with us. It's technology at its finest, right? Jana, do you know if Līga is trying to reconnect or
Yes,
anything?
she's trying. I put her a number by which she can call in, so we'll see if she
Okay.
knows to.
Maybe now? Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Okay.
Hey.
Ay. Okay. All right. Moving on. Okay. All right. I want to talk about the EU cybersecurity strategy. And when you look at the previous cybersecurity strategy in 2013, or was it 12? And if you compare it to the strategy now in 2020, there are huge differences. When we looked at the first EU cybersecurity strategy, there were distinct pillars for defense, internal market legislation, and cyber diplomacy. And I would say that all of these three sectors have exponentially increased in importance, in depth of policy issues, in developments, to the extent that this could very well be seen in the 2020 strategy, just because the ambition and the maturity of the strategy is astronomically different. And when presenting the strategy back in December, and Vice President Sheena said the age of innocence is over, I think that's an understatement at this point. starting with 2017, where we had WannaCry and NotPetya attacks, and now even in the last few months with SolarWinds and Hafnium being the attacks in the press. And now just recently in the last week, the attack against the Irish healthcare system, it's clear that there has to be much more done. But of course, this can't be done through legislation, diplomacy, or defense together alone. So let's look at these individual parts of the strategy. So let's to address legislation as one part of the bigger picture on cybersecurity. So when we receive legislation, you know, when I moved to Microsoft, it was almost like just representing a different and admittedly much larger government. You know, I think the comparison between Latvia and Microsoft is quite obvious. Small government, huge multinational corporation. But you know, you look at it in kind of the same way. What are the strategic issues? Is the how does one piece of legislation fit into your larger agenda of what you're trying to achieve, whether with your products and your services, and what is the general approach that you want to have? Where at this point, we want to be very positive towards this kind of legislation because it does address what the meaning is of protecting critical infrastructure in Europe. So when you look at, there's a large difference between when NIS 1 came out and now that we have a new proposal on NIS, and which is the recognition of digital services as critical infrastructures. This was one of the biggest discussion points when looking at NIS 1. What does critical infrastructure actually entail, and can we include digital services in that? I think we've gotten past that discussion, which is clear, and this is also reflected in the two separate, the essential and the important entities that are in the NIS 2 proposal. And we have many digital services provided by Microsoft in the first one, including communication platforms such as WebEx or Teams. Those are all now seen as critical infrastructures, which is different. So how do we get the kind of issue? And now that digital being regulated from lots of different directions, whether it be looking at telecommunications or from the cybersecurity perspective. So we have to look at harmonization of key issues. Cloud security or cloud services as a critical infrastructure, an essential entity in NIS 2. There's a lot of devil in the details type issues with NIS. How do we look at the certification piece being part of the security requirements? How will we address the fact that NIS or the Cybersecurity Act has certification as a voluntary measure, and now it's moving more into the mandatory measures? These kind of details need to be specified, but I think in the discussions between member states and the Parliament, this will work out. We've certainly given input to that we do need clarity. And what else did I want to say about harmonization? We're concerned about, you know, this is one of the great things about having experience in council, as I did have the pleasure of sitting in the telecommunications working group and in the cybersecurity horizontal working group on cyber issues in council, because you see how when you discuss legislation in different areas of council, it can go in different tracks. So we've also definitely emphasized that having this harmonization across legislation is important, and we do urge Commission to keep track of how all negotiations on EECC, on DORA, on the Director on the Critical Resilience of Entities go ahead, because to be able to understand the details of reporting and parallel security requirements is going to be key for legislation for the digital platforms. Other things that we have emphasized is that, you know, looking for really good solutions on legislation certainly needs to have this kind of input mechanism. So keeping up with any changes in the process of negotiations will be key. But we also see many other things besides the security requirements and the reporting requirements within NIS that we see areas of public-private cooperation, and I think we'll go into that next. So looking at NIS 2, besides the details of the security requirements and incident reporting and defining those incidents, there's lots of opportunities here for cooperation. And I think that we've seen through many incidents that have occurred that it's really, we see ourselves the first responder when it comes to a cyber incident. We immediately, within seconds, are pelted with questions and address issues on cyber attacks without waiting for an invitation from governments. So it's really important for us to bolster that cooperation, whether it be in the cooperation group, the CSIRT network, or in Cyclone. There's, of course, those groups have different kinds of structures and address different issues, but we see opportunities here. I think the cooperation group is really focused on
Līga, we lost.
Will we ever find out what is the cooperation group for? Let's see.
We are trying to connect Līga back here.
Hi, Yana. Yana, you mentioned earlier that you shared the phone detail to dial in there. Maybe you can send it to Līga so that she can call in.
Yes, indeed. This is what I did just now. But let me try to contact her directly via phone.
Yes, please. Thank you. Because at least like we won't see her, but like we will be able to hear her, which is the most important. Yeah, Luigi, I see you just joined us. Thanks. Yeah, so Līga has been experiencing major connection issues, so she's been breaking out quite frequently. So we're trying to Yana is trying to solve the issue with Līga right now. Yeah. So maybe I can fill in the time in while waiting. So yeah, so before breaking out, Līga was speaking about the NIS directive at the EU level. So the Network Information Security Directive. First version of it was passed in 2018, if I'm not saying something wrong. And then there was the application period, and the intent behind it was to harmonize the cybersecurity approach across the EU member states. So it were some three of the main criteria were for EU member states to implement or to designate the official entity in their ministries or an official cybersecurity agency that would be at the top of their cybersecurity at the national level. The second, hey, Līga.
Hi, apologies. I'm just
No worries. I was
watching the
filling in
connectivity.
yeah, no worries.
See, this is why I was just demonstrating why online platforms are critical entities, and that's why it was important for this interruption and connection. But okay, hopefully we can go on, and now I have the dial in if if I need it again. All right, so I wanted to point out that these opportunities are going to be quite important to bolster stakeholder engagement. And one thing I did not note here, but I can discuss as well, which is of interest, of course, to the European Cybersecurity Organization, which is part of the Women for Cyber, is also looking at how we can have that kind of public-private engagement as well through the competence, the EU cybersecurity competence centers and the European hub now that it will be in Bucharest. So that's interesting to note at this point as well. And oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges that we have is where can we really have most impact as the private sector? Because the strategy does outline very many points of intersection where we can have shared resources or a shared approach to these things. So it will be interesting to see how these things go ahead. Of course, the cooperation group and the CSIRT network have had opportunities for engagement, but we do see that it's limited engagement with the industry. And so to try to get across our perspectives, whether it be on threat intelligence, on detailed certification issues, it's not always the easiest way to go through these particular groups. But we can discuss ENISA and ad hoc working groups and lobbying by other means as well in the question and answer session, if that's of interest to anyone. Let's move on to the next one now. And just touching on NIS as well, I think I pointed out some of these questions that we've had in general. We're quite happy with the new proposal from the Commission, but we have been looking at how certification will go ahead. We've been involved in the ENISA ad hoc working group on cloud security and the certification process through the Cybersecurity Act. So it's been a bumpy road to try to establish exactly what cloud certification means, and we try to be involved in there to give the extent of experience we have on the global level with certification to there. So definitely keeping an eye on that. And I've also have here listed, main establishment we've been looking at, which it's always the details that we get caught up in sometimes, because in following a legal definition of a main establishment may not always fall in line with what we consider our main establishment to be in Dublin. But these are issues that are not necessarily the highest strategic points. On supply chain security, we are looking forward to the horizontal ICT security regulation that's coming up, and to see how that corresponds with how these two lands. And some of these issues I did want to also mention that it's always interesting to watch how digital sovereignty and more political issues influence the negotiation of legislation, and how that trickles down to issues like certification on data localization, and how we adapt our cloud services to meet these demands in Europe. Let's go to the next one. I was worried about time, but with these connectivity interruptions and going on about details, maybe I'm using up too much time. But let's see how it goes ahead. And it's why I enjoy in-room and in-person engagements, because you can see reactions. I can't even see if people are leaving the discussion or if this is really interesting. So I see Nina, so you're still smiling, so it can't be that bad. In any case, okay, moving on to non-legislative elements of the strategy. When we opened the strategy for the first time in December and looked at all of the non-legislative elements, I was really quite surprised. by all of the opportunities. And again, it's an effort to look and see where we should prioritize our influence. We're very much looking forward to the Joint Cyber Unit, because looking at crisis management and large-scale cyber attacks is, first of all, through the blueprint that was developed a few years ago. I think it was 2017. There was not much industry involvement, and it certainly did focus on how the EU can harness all of the mechanisms it has within it to address large-scale cyber attacks. However, the element of industry at that point was not necessarily addressed, which makes sense. You have to get kind of your own house in order before you could add external partners. But I hope that the Joint Cyber Unit, which has hinted at industry involvement, will certainly go forward in that direction. But moving a little bit past legislation and looking at more of the diplomacy side and multi-stakeholderism on capacity building and cyber norms, it's interesting to also to note how the EU external cyber capacity building agenda will develop. And here I could certainly look at how the EU interacts and what the priorities it puts on the UN discussions that were taking place in the open-ended working group and continue in the GGE, how that will affect how Europe goes forward on capacity building. One of the most important points that came out of the discussions at the open-ended working group at the UN was certainly that capacity building has to be key, and kind of bridging this digital divide that exists will be a priority. And not only is it a priority, but it's something that we can agree on globally. I think there's not always so many issues that there's global agreement, but at least capacity building is something that can go ahead. So we'll be looking to see how the program of action to advance responsible state behavior in cyberspace will go ahead on the UN level, and how that will be included in the priorities of the EU presidencies upcoming, especially for the French presidency, considering that France was one of the the first proposals of the program of action at the UN level to increase capacity building. So interesting to see how those things will develop and how other stakeholders will be involved. A few other things that I wanted to know on the EU cyber defense. Here, I think here I note that the EU has decided to involve also the US and Canada in various defense initiatives under PESCO. This is important for many reasons. I think that, we can go into detail also about what does the transatlantic alliance mean to the EU, and especially on cyber and technological issues. But I think making the availability of programs to other democratic partners around the world will only benefit the EU to gain the best experience that companies such as Microsoft have had globally. To be fair, we often find it difficult to get involved in EU programs, especially those that include funding. So to us, it's often more difficult to get involved in sort of multilateral cooperation arrangements, especially when it's for development of products and services that have gone through PESCO, through Horizon 2020 projects or Digital Europe projects. So we always keep an eye on it, but sometimes those the necessary involvement in the administrative processes are quite cumbersome. So that's one thing that I've learned from the industry perspective, that getting involved in these programs is quite difficult. Even with the wonderful help of the European Cybersecurity Organization. So thanks, Luigi, we try. Okay, so let's see what else I can move on to. I'm just pausing and looking at my slides ahead to see where I want to go with these discussions. Yeah, the strategy certainly does address issues that we look at more holistically and try to combine with our efforts on democracy and protecting journalism and election security. So we're following the European Democracy Action Plan and its intersection with cyber resilience in the strategy. I already mentioned the program of action. and the connection to the UN process. And we're also just a quick note on how cyber sanctions were addressed in the EU cybersecurity strategy. The idea of having qualified voting majority rather than consensus voting on sanctions, I find quite interesting. So how this discussion will go ahead will be also of interest to the private sector. The private sector does have a high level of interest in threat intelligence and cooperating with governments, and also how this feeds into sanctions and decision-making process. One of the frustrations I had when sitting on the government side, it was that it seemed that even on the EU, where there's lots of information sharing among governments, whether it be through EU and NATO, there was still a very national approach to looking at assessments on threats. And the issue of attribution was extremely sensitive, I would say, until the last year or so. So these discussions were very difficult because there was not a common situational awareness in Europe, taking from intelligence from all areas where it was possible to get them. So to me, the participation of industry in providing technical details or threat intelligence on cyber attacks could be a useful venue to develop further, especially in these pre-discussions and what needs to be prepared in the process of making those political decisions on sanctions. Okay, let's go forward. Jana, next slide. Let's keep going. I think I've covered some of these issues already. I've elaborated quite a bit on previous slides, so just quickly checking to see what I could add on this. We're certainly, we see ENISA as the main cooperation point on technical cooperation and operational cooperation for us. I think the new mandate of ENISA under the Cybersecurity Act did allow for a lot of different working groups engagement on the expert level. I have also been curious to know how the cooperation between the European Defence Agency, the EAS, not the EAS, the Foresighted Memorandum on Cybersecurity between EU organizations will go ahead, and we often look to see how we can combine the efforts of CERT-EU, the European Defence Agency, ENISA, and I'm missing the fourth one, EC3, to see how we can cooperate, because separately we've done quite a bit of work with the, ENISA, specifically now that the cloud security certification is going on, and other certifications will be upcoming in line with the Union Rolling Work Plan developed for this purpose. EAS and the ETA is a bit of a unique opportunity, and I see more cooperation upcoming with both of those EU institutions and bodies. EAS is a bit of an interesting case, I think, and we work most with the EAS looking how we can promote cyber diplomacy. And the EAS has been very active at looking at how they can engage stakeholders as well, and this has also been something that's matured over the years as cyber diplomacy has gotten a bit more prominent on the agenda as well. I very well remember looking back at, it was 2014, when the EU started to negotiate its first council conclusions on cyber diplomacy. And it was really a bumpy negotiation, which is something that seems to be not such a difficult topic these days, but trying to figure out how to address cyber diplomacy from the EU perspective was quite difficult. And forging ahead on the first council conclusions was challenging. How do you address, it was clear that the EU recognizes the applicability of international law, but the details about addressing sensitive topics such as attribution, it was just too early for that. So since then, there have been numerous council conclusions on cyber diplomacy and cyber issues that have benefited from a bit more ease. And I think this has also been assisted by the UN process and the more ambition for the EU to be more unified on externally facing issues on cyber diplomacy, to really push for the European values within those discussions has helped along that process. The EAS is also, just to note, under Vice President Mogherini, she established the Global Tech Panel, which met several times and included Microsoft as well. We think that this process was a good start to the discussions on involving multi-stakeholder discussion on high-level strategic issues involving technology, and that involved academics, private companies, and government representatives, but we think that this could be taken further, especially as we have seen the need to both coordinate with NATO, re-evaluate the transatlantic relationship, and also looking at how the European Council itself could address emerging security challenges and take advantage of input from the tech sector. So lots of opportunities there as well. A quick note on cooperation with EC3. We do look at how cybercrime can cooperate with, or not cybercrime, cooperate with the private sector. I mean, private sector can help governments and law enforcement address cybercrime, and for this we have an extensive digital crimes unit that specifically has grown out of looking at piracy in the tech sector to now really looking at botnet takedowns and trying to figure out how to very actively address like business email compromises. So, you know, the level of phishing attacks that occur, of course, is higher every day, but the very specific and detailed approach to phishing, you know, you used to get emails from Nigerian princes to give your bank accounts. Now it's very, very much more tailored and much, much more susceptible to have that human error that does cause malware to enter your systems and so forth. So that's something that we continue to work on, and cybercrime develops at exponential rates, and we do try to keep up with that to make sure that we can assist the EU through the EC3 the best that we can. Europol, of course. Okay, moving on. Nina, do you think it's best to stop for questions, or should I just keep going?
I don't know, participants, do you have any questions? I mean, I already have 2 questions lined up here, honestly. So I am ready for them if you're ready, but if you have more things to say, I'm happy to listen to you. Please share your knowledge and wisdom with us. And yes, and to our participants, please don't hesitate to let me or Saskia know if you have any questions, and we will invite you to speak.
Okay, I think I have a few more slides here to go. I'll keep moving on.
Go on, Līga. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Can you go one ahead, please? Okay. On engagements with international organizations, I think I touched on the UN a little bit. Thing that I think is quite just will develop in the future with a multi-stakeholder approach. With the Secretary General's NATO 2030 agenda, we saw some opening towards different kinds of partnerships and addressing a bit more openness and transparency. Maybe this was thinking on my part. These statements seem to have changed over time as well, especially on cyber. Had the benefit of being a part of a representation to NATO and working on the Cyber Defense Committee. So I have some perspective from the inside of NATO, and it was always a big challenge to see how could we keep up with the pace of technology from the side of the governments. So seeing that the messages of NATO now are quite encouraging, that the really how engage with the tech sector more actively. And while there's always been a lot of cooperation on the side of procurement, and really technical details and adaptation, NATO had a cloud policy already from 2016. So there's short discussions on the level, but kind of trying to understand how technology is influencing geopolitics and how NATO should adapt and keep its own strategic edge in the face of rapid developments in other parts of the world is really key to look at how industry should be engaged in this effort. Clearly, it's well known that Microsoft has worked with different governments to develop technologies like the use of HoloLens or different kinds of trainings. Or also, we've worked together through Microsoft Research and NATO ACT on disinformation. But looking a bit more in detail about the new policies and the new directions of NATO, like on the AI strategy, emerging disruptive technologies, roadmaps, offers opportunities to see how we can help. We will, of course, wait to see how NATO sees the openness and how they want to shape this kind of engagement. We have great examples from the EU. The Commission puts out statements. We have public consultations before, during, after. Public consultations take up, I think my colleague Jana on this call can agree with me that writing public consultations for the Commission takes up a lot of time. But in the end, it's an excellent opportunity to give input. So that there's open and it's transparent, and we can easily collaborate among industry, either through trade associations to give this input or by ourselves, and this is a very acceptable and open process. With NATO, there is no process such as this. So we're very interested to see how this will go forward. As I said before, the NATO summit will have several topics on technology, and we'll be adopting several strategies and roadmaps for the way ahead. And we hope to see some opportunities for a higher level of industry engagement, but specifically on more strategic issues, on how do we match what the EU is doing, what NATO is doing, what the transatlantic relationship is at this point, and how we can piece that together for the benefit of allies, EU member states, and the transatlantic space. That's a little bit more on NATO and how we look at NATO issues. I can briefly touch on the OSCE as well. We were proud to be the first private sector representatives back in 2007 to participate in the chairmanship conferences and the OSCE Permanent Council. I've had the benefit to advise the ad hoc working group on ICTs at OSCE, on various aspects of how Microsoft gets engaged with government affairs and international organizations. And I think one of our most active engagement on cybersecurity with many governments and these organizations goes through our government security program. So we have a government security program that perhaps some of you know about, which engages with legal contracts, threat and information sharing, sharing of source code, expert cooperation, and additional assistance in cases of specific incidents. One thing I did want to mention, I'm not sure, Jana, could you go to the next slide? On the multi-stakeholder approach. Here I wanted to highlight two initiatives that were involved in closing and really to emphasize where we've seen a lot of multi-stakeholder engagement driving ahead and advancing cyber norms and cooperation and capacity building. So we see it in 2018, the French government announced the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace. And I'm happy to say that Women for Cyber, I think, finally became a endorser of the Paris Call. So happy to have that Women for Cyber involved in the Paris Call as well. But the idea behind the Paris Call was to emphasize principles that 9 different principles on cybersecurity that were more or less widely accepted globally, and to eventually bring on board a base of endorsers that would bring it to be the largest multi-stakeholder initiative in cybersecurity. So this has grown from an endorsement campaign, trying to bring 9 principles, to really working groups that address the 9 different principles of the Paris Call. So for instance, now we have, there's 6 Paris Call working groups, and Microsoft is now taking the lead on the working group on advancing norms, together with F-Secure at the University of, I want to say, Bologna. Could be wrong on that, I'll check, but we tried to bring together this academic, private sector engagement to really look at how we can advance norms in cyberspace. There's different groups looking at a cyber peace index on the Paris Call, in the role of the Paris Call in international agreements. I don't have my list in front of me, but in any case, for the working groups in previous years, we really focused on election security principle, in cooperation with the Government of Canada and Alliance for Security and Democracy to establish baselines for election security, the best practices. We've also participated either as Microsoft or the Cybersecurity Technical Board in the principle of cyber hygiene, and worked together with excellent partners such as Global Cyber Alliance and Cyber Green, and also addressed basic principles of what it means to apply hackback cyber incidents and the private sector role in diverting cyber attacks. The next and last initiative I wanted to leave you with is that after the cybersecurity strategy was announced in December, it was clear that there was a higher appetite for multi-stakeholder engagement by the EAS and the member states. And this was also reflected in March in the Council conclusions on the EU cybersecurity strategy. So together with many different governmental and non-governmental partners, we established the European Cyber Agora. And we thought that this was an excellent way to have a dedicated platform to engage with multi-stakeholders on detailed expert-level discussions on how the multi-stakeholder model can address various issues within the strategy and for Europe as a whole. We think that Europe is, sometimes we feel like we're preaching to the choir in Europe, that everyone is very much focused on the applicability of international law in cyberspace, fundamental rights, and free, open, and fair internet. But how can we take this message globally in a way that makes sense and achieves European priorities? Microsoft is a global company, but we share these values, so how can we work together? There's the European Cyber Agora will, of course, this year be an online event on the 2nd and 3rd of June. And we've had many governments and non-governmental partners expressing interest in various workshops. So it's basically kind of a gathering and discussion forum to discuss more detailed issues and interests. The workshops on everything from human rights to 5G. We try to focus on linking it directly to the cybersecurity strategy to see how we can come up with recommendations on various points that have been outlined in the cybersecurity strategy, really from this kind of multi-stakeholder environment. What can we add to the government discussions that can kind of enrich the process of discussing cybersecurity and really match the ambition of the EU cybersecurity strategy? So we'll hopefully see if that will be an event that we continue in further years, and see how that can develop. So on that note, I think I'm going to finish. I appreciate you listening, and apologize again for the connectivity issues. So happy to take any questions, or go into detail any further on these points.
Thank you so much, Līga. That was very, very interesting to listen to you. And actually, if I can add to the European Cyber Agora initiative, our own secretary Luigi is going to speak there on the 3rd of June on the cyber norms based on the Paris Call and the protection of critical infrastructure. So there is something to look forward to it. And you said how to improve the government's approach to cybersecurity. I would say to start by listening the voices of the private sector, but this is my own opinion. All right. On this note, I will kindly invite the participants to raise their hands or let us know if they have questions. While I'll let you all gather your thoughts, maybe I can start with my first. Oh no, wait, there is already a question from another Nina, by the way. Nina, would you like to speak up?
Yes, thanks. I'm not sure if my connectivity is right. No, I thought, what do you see as the biggest challenge for cyber collaboration between within the EU? So both between states and both states and private sector going forward. I mean, there are many challenges. So what are the main challenges in your view?
Thanks. I often joke that.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. We got her broken out, but I think Līga, you got the gist of her question, right?
Yeah, I often joke that there's many cyber Ninas, so I'll add you to the cyber Nina mix of already 3 cyber Ninas that I'm very familiar with. So now it's 4. Okay,
Nina Givakin from F-Secure.
Yeah, she's included in my original cyber Ninas in any case. Yeah, this is a good point. I'll address the first thing that comes to my mind. There was recently at the Munich Security Conference that took place online, and the resulting report, there was a evaluation of digital distrust across Europe and the various different interpretations of what trust in the digital sector means. And trust is about as an ambiguous word as multi-stakeholderism sometimes, but I think this is certainly the biggest challenge. So the best approaches to cybersecurity, in my view, come from sharing information, sharing threats, and finding ways to do that before major incidents. However, due to either political distrust or different concerns in different sectors, this does not happen as smoothly as possible. And I think that this is the biggest challenge that we face. Like I said, that there are, within the NIS2, there are opportunities to include the private sector more in discussions of government. But what I've seen on the government side, it's often the fact that governments have difficulties even talking to each other. So how do you get past those silos in a way that works? Well, it's often crisis that drives the solutions. If you could see that, I'm not sure we would be having this virtual class, a year and a half ago. But we've gotten used to using digital tools, and we I don't know if you trust the digital tool or not, but we accept them as a part of life. And accepting this kind of more openness to information sharing, I think will be something that in time has to happen. I hope it doesn't happen through a major crisis, rather through kind of slow creeping forward and finding cooperation mechanisms, either through legislation or through a more of a informal, huge coffee discussion like the Cyber Agora. I have my own vision of how this should look in real life, but finding ways, and we are creeping forward. The same questions that we were discussing 5 years ago have advanced much, much further. So I am positive about being able to address the challenges on cooperation in cybersecurity. It's just slower than it needs to be.
Thank you, Lydia. Actually, I will jump on what you said. Yes, information sharing is at the core of the cooperation here, but and EXO is doing a lot as well. I'll do a little bit of self-promotion here, but also you are a representative of the private sector and the public sector, and you come from the public sector as well. My question is, what could EXO do for to help and improve the cybersecurity cooperation for the private sector, and that would be approved and more than welcomed by the public sector? I know it's a very tricky question that can go very deep, and I see Luigi smiling there, but I don't know if you could maybe offer some elements of response here. That I would really appreciate it.
I need a connectivity problem to ponder this question. So
Sorry.
yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's also a question that I've discussed with several Romanian colleagues, and this is at the top of their mind because now they have the European hub for the network of competence centers, and trying to harness what is available, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. We've seen this with EXO, which has been an excellent public-private cooperation mechanism in Europe, and it's generated lots of different work streams that are really essential to gaining the private sector's understanding of how to take advantage of what's going on at the European level. How to take this into kind of the next steps, I really can't give you an answer right now, to be honest. We work, and I grappled with this question myself because I represent European government affairs and what Microsoft could do at a European level. Nationally, it seems much easier. Nationally, you can connect to academia much easier. You can connect to local governments much easier. And I realize that we try to, with European initiatives, pull it all together somehow. What often gets lost is that you get a company like Microsoft can be engaged at all levels and has just the sheer size to be able to address all these things. But you kind of lose the SMEs along the way simply because they're too busy in the rhythm of work and, making a living and a profit for themselves to get them engaged in bigger initiatives. And this is one of the biggest challenges I think that we face. I often do think it's the sort of softer side of the kind of Paris calls that has you reaching out with roundtables once a year to check in on those SMEs on a national level to see, this is what we're doing. Can we involve you somehow? What interests you in cybersecurity that keeps these conversations going and keeps them engaged? So while it doesn't necessarily directly address your question maybe, but to keep the kind of engagements and kind of the big initiatives that we can drive with bigger governments or bigger companies, but also push to engage smaller companies along the way, and also civil society and activity, I think has a greater result overall. This is a question that I'll keep thinking about all the time, how to have better engagement and how to harness what's the full answer. But those are first thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you very much, Līga. I really appreciate it. And I knew that there was no simple answer to this, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this question. And indeed, I agree with you that it is very difficult to have a balanced participation and engagement among all the different stakeholders in the cybersecurity community. And I see that Luigi has raised his hand, so he wants to comment on this. So, and he's of course at the forefront of this question. So please, Luigi.
Actually, good morning, good afternoon, sorry everybody. My question is slightly different actually. It's a question, it's not a comment. Because I'm started looking at cybersecurity and security issues in general some ages ago. And I remember something like, oh, what was it, maybe 10 years ago, we were little discussing about cybersecurity. At that time was actually more information security, something, information technology security, something like this. And there was a message from Microsoft in Brussels that we have to do more for awareness, do more for education, particularly education. And at that time, well, it was not, I had the feeling that it was too early, was not mature. People were not understanding enough the importance of this message. Now that we are moving to this digital transition, now that we have seen how much these remote connection are needed, even with the COVID and so on, we see that more awareness is needed. We see that for cybersecurity, more competence, but simply basic education sometimes is needed. So we are all coming to this old message that I heard first from Microsoft in Brussels, which now looks trivial. Nevertheless, it's still so difficult to have to move the countries, not to say the Commission, because the Commission about education, that's not a remit, is more a national issue. To have the countries moving this direction, supporting stronger education in digitalization, in digital, let me say, and especially on cybersecurity, both to better understand the threat and to, as we were promoting also in Women for Cyber, to make cybersecurity a potential career for everybody, for women, but also for men. So what is the situation today with Microsoft, with you, Līga?
I think this brings up a good question. I think this is one of the areas where we may have more opportunities to work, outside of what the Commission allows the EU to do together. And I think that's one of the benefits of having different initiatives that combine the multi-stakeholder efforts. One of the main, just yesterday, there was the Cybersecurity Skills Summit that we participated in, and we discussed how Microsoft could give more input on students and young professionals. And this was organized by the Youth IGF. And there was very many topics on, how can different careers can be developed in cybersecurity, and what can a company like Microsoft do? I think this is hold on, I'm trying to find some details that I can give you that we've tried to work on through the pace of digital transformation in COVID, but before that, and what kind of commitments that we tried to make in the future. We work, as you know, LinkedIn is part of Microsoft, and here we have made more and more opportunities available through LinkedIn Learning. And this is one area where we can supersede, people who may have mobility issues or difficulties getting to locations to learn or limited time engagements, and providing training and skills that can be used by anyone in theory. Microsoft opened up 10 different learning paths for the most in-demand jobs these days, such as software developer, project managers, IT administrators, and data analysts. So we try to address these gaps that we see really in what we see in our own company that we need to have, as well as in Europe in general. We worked last year together with the Commission looking at AI skills and using LinkedIn resources to see who can be upskilled to meet the needs for new technologies. So by using the data available through LinkedIn, we worked with the Commission to provide a picture of how we can further develop those people who have some skills in this area, but don't necessarily match what the workforce is demanding. So using that platform gives us a lot of opportunities to upskill people who are already in the workplace, but may not necessarily realize that with a bit of additional training, they could fill the jobs that need to be in place. I think oftentimes we think about cybersecurity bringing people up from zero, but I think also matching those with some skills that are already in place is a bit of a valuable way to go about it as well. Nationally, we have AI academies throughout Europe that work on different skills. We have different innovation centers across Europe as well that try to engage students and youth groups, others who may be facing unemployment as well, to try to upscale them, and through various national initiatives as well. Yeah, I'll stop there on that one.
Thank you, Līga. Luigi, I think that largely answered your question, right?
Yeah. No, I was thinking, you know what, we had a discussion. We are reviewing these days in Women for Cyber Secretariat the roadmap that we have done something like almost 2 years ago, and we're reviewing it, and we're discovering a number of things that we could do more in detail, updated, and it will come out soon. In a few weeks, or maybe a couple of months max, I would say.
A few months.
Yeah. But it will be very interesting about the new topics. And one of the topics came out was while you were talking about reskilling and so on. But actually, one of the key issues that we have identified is how to get a first job. How to get a first job, maybe through an internship, through whatever, because when you're in, somehow it's easier, or could be easier, in a company that maybe will help you to adapt your competence and so on. But you are young, or you're still out of this game, how to get in. And for me, this is really a major challenge, both for those who are coming out of school, but also for those who maybe are looking for a job, which have never worked in this domain.
Luckily, I don't have to face that first job question, but we never know when we're going to be out of a job. So,
no, but you have done already. You already work in cyber. This is the first job, means the first job when you are looking for a job in this domain. First time.
But even getting the first job in this domain, before that, I was working in a sector that had, you would think that not so much to do with cybersecurity. I was working in bilateral relations at a Ministry of Defense, which I had heard about cyber. I knew that there was some engagement on the military level, but due to a series of coincidences, I found myself at council working on cybersecurity. So I think that you shouldn't see yourself as not working in the tech sector, because tech sector applies, it's relevant almost for any job you can think of. So trying to figure out where you're working and how you can, sort of not make the leap to technology, but find out what some sort of interim steps are. So just, okay, if I'm looking a bit closely at more of our global skills initiative from Microsoft. So learning about what are in-demand jobs, and looking at the tools that you can use to sort of get more information about those jobs and what kind of learning is available. So as I mentioned before, we've identified through the data we have, what are the in-demand jobs? We've identified what the free access is to learning paths to help people skills for those jobs. And then we also offer certification programs and job-seeking tools, how you can use that kind of education to find jobs in your area, elsewhere, so forth. That's a start, of course. I think being involved in organizations, whether it's Women for Cyber or following this kind of format, getting in touch with people who could give you advice is obviously the best way forward. That applies in any field, of course. We do happily provide internships in Microsoft as well. Happy to give more information on that. training programs, different types of, first job opportunities in tech as well. But we're not the only ones. Big corporations, which may seem daunting to approach, have lots of these programs, and they have them at the national level, so that it's to find the information. I'm happy to be in touch with anybody listening, or to provide links to other colleagues who can give insights from Microsoft. But I know that in my circle of big tech colleagues from other different corporations also provide these kind of opportunities.
Thanks, Līga. Actually, you can, if you want to, you can share all these links with us, and we will happily put them on the Women for Cyber LinkedIn discussion group.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, because the purpose of that group is indeed to share with our community any types of opportunities. So traineeships, internships, job vacancies, speaking opportunities, events and stuff. So it's a big forum of exchange, and I think it would be the perfect place to advertise about the Microsoft internships, and any colleague of yours who wants to share their links as well. Speaking of positions, I just wanted to ask of you, because you have this experience being a cyber diplomat. Now, that is a kind of an obscure term, honestly, for me, and it's like a philosophical question. What is cyber diplomacy? What is it? What does it mean to be a cyber diplomat? Because I know the concept of diplomacy, and I kind of know what cybersecurity means. I mean, you never really know. But what does the concept of cyber diplomacy entail concretely? What do you have to do? So I'm asking this for maybe those of our participants or followers who would be interested in such a career.
Sure, and I think cyber diplomacy is much like any word that's had cyber added to it to make it sound a bit more exciting and new. When it's exciting, but it's not necessarily new. That you could add anything to diplomacy. The diplomats have to work with various portfolios. Cyber is one of them. It's just a bit new as far as how it gets discussed at various international organizations, and what are the emphasis that you represent in international organizations, and recognizing what are the various global views on cyber issues, whether that be, the international law in cyberspace is probably the most prominent and contested discussion that's at the global level. Different countries have different positions on how open, free, and fair the internet should be, and how individual rights should apply online. So I would say that drives most cyber diplomatic discussions. But cyber diplomats are just plain diplomats, except that this sphere can certainly involve stakeholders who are not necessarily government representatives. I claim to do cyber diplomacy, but I don't represent a country. So it's a bit of a stretch on the term of diplomacy, but representing the interests of a larger organization to help shape global approaches to cyber norms and applicability of international law and cooperation is the bulk of the issue. Okay, now we really have cyber ambassadors, cyber attaches, and so forth. And as you said yourself at the beginning of this discussion, I was the first Latvian cyber diplomat, because it's quite cool. But to be honest, there was just not a demand for it before to have a diplomatic post that specifically addressed cybersecurity, certainly not at the EU or at NATO individually. This used to be one topic that was covered by a diplomat that had several portfolios. In the EU, it was mostly either telecoms, a little bit of foreign affairs, and at NATO, it was also, split more as a technical issue that perhaps was discussed at one point on the agenda once a year on the sort of strategic political side, and left to technical committees to decide on certifications, on standards that NATO used on information security issues and so forth. So I think the concept of the cyber diplomat has advanced as the issue has become a bit more strategic. and something that really raises to the heads of state level of how technology is influencing geopolitics. Oh, to get into this field, that could be another longer story.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your last sentence.
I would say how to get into this field. I would say, well, from my own experience, it was, I think the concept of cybersecurity was quite foreign at the time I got into it. And it was a bit of a looking around the room. Does anyone know about this? Does anyone want to know about this? Okay, good. Go for it. But it was a bit of a new concept, both in defense and security, that there would really have to be targeted discussions in a multilateral organization that dealt just with cybersecurity. And it's in a sense, if you're a true government cyber diplomat, it's the same path as getting into any civil service. So it's just showing an interest towards the more role of technology in governance of in the public sector that could drive that.
Thanks, Līga. So I think the bottom line here is, if you are interested in it, go for it. Never hesitate. And if you're a woman, even better, because we seriously like in women in cybersecurity in any field. So would that be cyber diplomacy or any other aspect? So on this note, I think it is time to conclude this masterclass. I would like to say again one big thank you to Līga for her time and commitment, and for sharing her experience and wisdom with us today. It was very, very interesting to learn about cybersecurity taken from the perspective of different many stakeholders, would they be European or international, public or private. And so thanks a lot, Līga, really for being with us today. To our participants, thank you very much for bearing with us today. It was a little bit complicated, but as I said, it's technology at its best. Sometimes it works and sometimes it's just a pain in the neck. But I think we managed to have a very interesting and instructive session, and that is the most important to us. So once again, I will finish with the usual. If you're interested in Women for Cyber, please do not hesitate to check our website. It's womenforcyber.eu, and or follow us on the different social media channels: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We're everywhere, so no way to miss us. And even better now, we actually have national chapters, many of them, so you can also check out their social media channels and their websites for the ones who already have one. And I would say stay tuned for our next masterclasses. We already have 2 lined up for June, but I'm not saying anymore. You will see. It is very promising, and I'm just teasing you here, but keep your eyes open. We will, of course, communicate about it all on our social media channels. And now I'm wishing you all a great weekend to come. Yes, I'm decreeing that weekend is starting now. And see you all next time. Thanks again. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Oh, it's just the 3 of us here. And Luigi just ah, crap, yeah, I forgot. Damn it. Honestly, I was just so relieved that it was over. Oh, crap.